Hello and welcome to part 1 of our CISO mentoring webinar series, Landing Your First CISO Job with Steve Katz. I'm Ellen Zhang with Digital Guardian, and I will be your moderator today. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to submit questions that we will answer at the end of the presentation. Before our live Q&A session, we will also randomly select and announce the winner for the one-on-one executive coaching session with Steve. Make sure you stay online to see if you're the winner. We'll also email you both the recording and slides of the webinar. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Steve is recognized as the world's first CISO. He brings a wealth of experience tying information security and business goals in organizations including Citigroup, JP Morgan, Deloitte, and Kaiser Permanente. He is the founding member of the Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and has testified in front of Congress to provide analysis on information security issues. Steve is currently an executive advisor to Deloitte's Security and Risk Practice and runs a security executive consulting practice to mentor and coach information security leaders as they grow their careers. Bill Bradley leads product marketing for data loss prevention at Digital Guardian. He brings over 20 years of technology, marketing, and sales experience to the role. He spent the first portion of his career in field sales and maintains his customer-centric mentality in his current role in marketing at Digital Guardian. And now it is my pleasure to pass it over to Steve.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Digital Guardian team, for inviting me to do this webinar. I'm very happy to do it. And I take a look at landing your first CISO job, and the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's the best career you can find. It is absolutely exciting. You will never get stale. You will constantly be learning, constantly making interesting decisions, but it's not quite what you expect. It's challenging, it's fun, it's exciting, it's frustrating, and gives you lots of sleepless nights. One of the things that happened to me earlier, and this has been quoted, this quote has been used a number of times, when I went to work for Citi and the hack became public knowledge, the first question I asked was, what was it like to be working for the, at that time, largest financial institution in the world that just got hacked? And I said, no problem. I sleep like a baby. I get up every 2 hours and cry. So let me give you a quick overview of my journey and how I got to where I am. And if we can just advance to the next slide. So I started right out of school at First National City Bank, and became involved with a internal consulting group that did system quality assurance, internal consulting. General background at that point was I did some assembly language coding, some COBOL coding, consulting and developing system development life cycles internally, and requiring people to put IDs and passwords into COBOL programs and Fortran programs, which are nothing short, more than tables with clear text information. But it was a beginning. And I was able to, at that point, spell security, and after a few years there, I got a call from a recruiter that let me know that Morgan Guarantee, which ultimately became JP Morgan Chase, was setting up an information security department, and would I be interested in joining the department and becoming part of it. What was interesting in that is that early on in my career, this had to be like mid-80s, the world began to be exposed to PC viruses, and you had lots of articles in the paper about can you catch a virus in your computer? What does it really do? And a company came in to demonstrate an antivirus program to me, and ran it on a couple of the PCs that we had in the area, and discovered that we were infected. Time I was reporting to the CIO. I went to him and said, listen, we've got to talk. We've got this computer virus thing. I think we've got a problem with it. And he turned to me and said, meet me in front of the boardroom tomorrow morning and we can talk about it. So next morning, I got up to the boardroom at JP Morgan, and you had to picture it as a classic Wall Street boardroom, paneled walls, huge desks. I'm waiting outside to talk to Bill, and Bill comes out and says, go in and tell them about the viruses. And it was an oh my God moment. But I had, what came to mind and pretty much set my career in motion is, how do I tell them the story? How do I make information security understandable at a board level? So I walk in, and it's, again, huge room and lots of people and, very expensive suits. And I turn around and say, I guess many of you have heard about computer viruses. You've seen the articles in the paper. You've seen some stuff on television. They are real. And let me give you an idea of what they're all about. So we have a big trading room here at Morgan Guarantee. Picture yourself sitting at a trading desk, and 5s become 8s, 6s become 9s, 0s become 4s. What does that do to our trading position? How long will it take us to just lose every trade we have? And you can see jaws opening, and the only question that came up was, can that really happen? I said, absolutely. They said, can you do anything to stop it? Can you prevent it? I said, what we can do is lower the risk, but there always will be a risk. And the view is, okay, whatever it takes, go spend it, go do it, put in what we have to do to mitigate the risk and keep us informed about where we are. Well, what made it work was the fact that I told them a story, and the story had meaning to them. They were able to relate to it. If you take a look at stories that have, Bibles have worked wonders because prophets told fables, told tales, made things real. And the job of security, what stood it out in my mind and said, going forward, if I can make it real and tangible to a board, I can make it real and tangible to any executive in a company. So I was there, I guess, from early 80s to 1994, and word on the street was that Citicorp was hacked. And I was asked to come in and really be interviewed for the position. And I really went to see what happened there so it wouldn't happen at Morgan, but the position sounded so incredibly interesting that I continued the interview process. And essentially two guys out of St. Petersburg, Russia, dialed into an international funds transfer system, pre-internet, that was running in a DEC-VAX environment. And all production data and production password files were there. The hack became known, I guess, a month after I got there. Became a board item, and I was told to spend what you had to spend, do what you had to do, make Citi's program world-renowned, world-acceptable, do what you can do to make sure it doesn't happen again. And oh, by the way, it was the international funds transfer system. Go out and talk to our 20 biggest international clients and let them know that we had this under control and convince them, if possible, to stick with us. So on the plane heading over to Europe, I said, okay, how do I make this one realistic? And I turned around and came up with 6 very fundamental questions. And it was, do you know who you're talking to, or do you care who you're talking to? If you know who they are, do you want to be able to control and monitor what they do? Is the information you're dealing with, is it something that should be kept confidential or private? Is the integrity of information important? If it's a transaction, would you want a signed receipt? And if there's a problem, would you want to know about it? And these are just non-technical questions, but it's the questions that corporate treasurers and corporate controllers can understand and relate to. And then I sat down with each of them and said, okay, here is what Citi was doing when this hack took place. Here is what we're doing now, and here's what we'll be doing in the next 6 months. And then I said, I would urge you to go out and talk to the security departments, if you have them in your companies, and find out how you're answering those questions, because you have to protect yourself internally. And oh, by the way, I would go talk to your other banks and find out how they are how they are performing these activities. Followed up with all of them when I got back to the States, and interesting enough, I was told that Citi was the only company that was willing to discuss what we were doing. The other banks said it's security, they didn't want to talk about it. And I urged them to go back and make sure that the other banks talked about it. And my charter was to minimize the loss of customers. And because the message was tangible and understandable, we didn't lose one, which reinforced my position of saying, God, this guy's credible. He understands the problem from a business perspective, and He understands how we can use security to keep customers that we felt were going to walk away. And it's a lesson that's carried me through with my career at Citi and going forward. If we can go to the next slide, we'll just sort of talk about, next slide, please. Lots of people I talk to, and it's sort of part of the question is, I get called about CISO wannabes or people working two down from CISOs today who said they're interested in becoming a CISO. So, and the first question I ask them, and one you may want to ask yourself if this is what you think you want to do, is why the heck do you want to become a CISO? What do you think they do? Why is this important? And you get some really interesting answers, but in many cases, well, I think they make more money. Okay, that's a possibility. But what is your passion? What is your experience? And then I say, well, if you're what are your strengths? What are your skills? And I would say more than half the time, maybe 3/4 of the time, I talk to some absolutely incredibly brilliant technology folks. They've spent 10, 15 years becoming incredibly good security architects, incredibly good database managers, incredibly good infrastructure managers. They have a skill that's untouchable. They have a skill that provides them with the best safety net they could possibly have. So I asked them, okay, is that something you want to walk away from? Because if you're going to move into a CISO role, if you're going to move into working more with business leadership, you're going to have to step back from the skills you use day to day and start using, negotiating skills, communication skills, financial skills. And the more you move away into the soft skills, the more you're going to be moving away from your strengths and your hard skills. And you may never be able to climb that mountain again. So you're walking away from the best safety net you can get to walk into something that you are not sure of. So, and then I asked a couple of other interesting questions like, well, you want to be a CISO, I hear you. You're willing to make the sacrifice of developing the softer skills. You're willing to make the sacrifice of becoming, more of a communicator. You're willing to do a whole bunch of things that move you away from your strengths. What kind of experience or education have you developed or you're looking to develop to move into a CISO role? And then you hear various and sundry answers. And then, well, what CISOs have you spoken with? What security organizations have you gone to? Well, and then I hear, well, I've been to SANS. Well, SANS is very good, but have you been to other organizations where you have folks who are CISOs who are doing information security at small, medium, large companies that may not just be focusing strictly on technology? Have you gone to audit conferences? Have you gone to strategic conferences? Learn what it is you think you want to do before you decide you want to jump ship. Make sure you're following your passion. Next, if you go to the next slide, it's like, here's some of the questions I sort of asked the new CISO. And a lot of these are really not directly related to security, but I get some interesting answers. And if you are the new CISO or you're looking to become the new CISO, and I'm always amazed when I pose this first question: why should your company have a security program? And you would expect that the people would have a ready answer. It's whether it's a compliance issue, whether it's protecting intellectual property, for just a myriad of reasons, but they would have thought through why the company should have a security program. Because if you can't explain why, if you don't really understand why, how are you going to be able to communicate to anybody? But the next question I ask, and it's sort of it gets to the heart of a whole lot of things. How does your company generate revenue? And what I hear a lot is, gosh, corporate executives don't understand security. They don't really understand why it's important. And the question I pose back is, what do you know about the business your company does? One of the things I did at Citi is I sat down with my leadership team regularly, and generally two down, and said, understand something. Every executive that you meet with every one of them really believes that they are very, very bright. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant, but they believe they're very, very bright. When you go and meet with them, if you don't understand what they're doing, and if you can't explain what you are doing in a way they're going to understand it, they know in their hearts they're bright enough to understand it, which means they will think that you are too incompetent to explain it. And I don't want to get a phone call from anybody saying somebody in my team is incompetent, because I didn't want incompetent people on my team. Harsh lesson, but they knew I was dead serious about it. And they knew that, to quote Dr. Einstein, if you can't make it simple, you don't understand it. So they found a way to make it simple. But some other questions for the new CISO. Have you found out who the key executives are in your company and what businesses they're in? Have you done especially in today's age, have you done any research on who these executives are, what they do, how they do it, what their backgrounds are? So when you meet with them, you have a sense of what they're all about. And then there are probably pictures available on Google that'll let you know who they are. Do you know who's on the board? And what is their background? Because they will look to you not only to think about what's going on in the company that they're on the board, but they will take information back from you to their companies. Another is, well, you've now taken this job. How do you market yourself and your program within your company? Have you put together a marketing plan so that you can develop personal credibility? Because that is also absolutely incredibly important. You have to know where you are and where you want to take yourself and what it's going to take to do that, to get you there. And the next thing you want to think about is, are you ready to be CEO of your information security company? Essentially, you will have a chief marketing officer who does your education awareness and awareness day efforts. You have a chief financial officer who's going to make sure that you develop a budget and you know how to move that across and sell that across the company. You have a chief technology officer who's going to make sure that you're on top of the latest technology that you have to be on top of. And all these people are there to keep your butt out of the fire, which means have you really done a great job of developing a team that can do that? You're the new CISO. Have you joined any industry organizations, peer groups, ISACs? The other thing I've encouraged new CISOs to do is, if you don't have a role model, if you don't have a mentor, go find one. Find one who is successful. They're out there. Some are for pay. Some will do it just because they do it. But you've got to find somebody who has the experience, who's done this day-to-day, that can help you through the waters of your first 90, 180, 360 days as a CISO. It's a tough, tough job, especially if you're moving into a new company, because they don't know you and you don't have, and you barely know them, and you know you got the job for God knows why, and you've got to go ahead and say you're going to make a difference, and they're going to have to believe it. The other thing for the new CISO, and I think this is incredibly important, first thing you want to do when you get there and you figure out where the bathrooms are, find out when the last security assessment was done, and find out who did it, and find out what the results were. And if it's been more than a year ago, bring in a really tough, really well-focused, well-known company to do a security assessment, a company whose name will resonate with the board, and find out where the security department stands. How good or bad is the program? If there's a maturity level, how mature do you think it is? What material weaknesses are out there right now? To the extent you discover them early, they become issues and problems you will solve, and they're issues and problems that you inherited. If you wait more than 90 to 180 days, these are, and you haven't done the assessment, and this is new news, guess what, guys? They are your problems, and you will have to solve it. And while you're getting these issues down and identified, you need to create a vision. You need to say, here's where I want to be, here's where I want to be in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And if you want to look at a maturity model, if you're starting out on a 1 to 5, and I realize these numbers are arbitrary, if you're starting out at 1.5, be conservative as you move from 1.5 to a 2 to 2.5 to a 3 to a 3.5, and figure out if you ever want to go beyond 3.5, is it going to be worth the expense? And the other is, as you look at your staff, are you standing on the shoulders of giants? Do you have a great team? Do you have great leaders? or is it time to go ahead and find some new people? With that, let me take a quick run and we can go to the next slide and just talk about different types of CISOs. This gets interesting, and it's if you haven't seen Gary McGraw's paper on his 4 tribes, look at it. I've sort of taken part of it and sort of rearranged it. We can look at these 4 levels of reactor, monitor, technologist, and enabler as serial. We can look at it as where people stay for a particular amount of time, and look at where people are for their, in terms of career goals and where they want to go with it. But the first I look at is the reactor, the firefighter. There is no security program. There's an event that happens. It's highly crisis-driven. You get the phone call. You may never have done anything with security, or somebody said, gee, we have to have a security person, so you're it. And you fight fires. You don't have any general policies or standards. You haven't pulled in any kind of frameworks. It's highly tactical. You are barely making, living with, meeting compliance or regulatory requirements. You live in fear of the next audit or examination because it's not going to look good for you, and hopefully you can get enough resources to keep yourself level. Otherwise, your replacement will be able to do that. The next one is, and I'm calling it the monitor, and this is a person who's, and it's not wrong, it's just an approach, is particularly compliance-driven. Compliance is the main focus. Generally, you'll find this in a heavily regulated industry. It could be banking, it could be insurance, could be health, whether HIPAA regulations or whether Federal Reserve Bank regulations. And the whole purpose of it is make sure we can check the boxes, make sure that when the external auditors come in, we're going to be covered. When I have to deal with an issue and I have to fight for budget, what I can do is I go across the company and say, you've got to do it because we have all these regulations. The government says we have to do it. The State Insurance Commission says we have to do it. So we really don't have any choice. And yes, I understand it's going to cost a whole lot of money to do something, but if we don't do it, we have all kinds of problems with the examiners. I'm saying we have to do it because I'm mommy, and mommy says you have to do it. And by the way, if you have kids, you know how successful that is. And then if you don't do it and you don't follow what mommy says, then we're going to get in trouble because daddy, which can be the internal audit team, the external auditors or examiners come in and they say you have to do it. And now we have a problem both with mommy and daddy, and now it comes to the board. And the board turns around and says, why is this a problem? Why didn't you get it solved? And I think one of the things you wind up having with this, certainly with the reactor and firefighter, and certainly with the monitor, is just draw for a picture a minute. You are the chief financial officer of a company, and the CEO gets on the elevator. And within the 10 floors that they ride together, it's hi Bill, hi Mary, and they quickly go over some financial issues around the firm. Same scenario, and generally you'll see this with the firefighter or the monitor, maybe the technologist. They're in the elevator, CEO gets on the elevator, and the only thing at that point that the monitor or reactor CISO wants to do is get off the elevator because there's never been any communication. And the challenge we have is, well, if you want to be the compliance-focused one or the firefighter, you really are dealing with an issue that's hard to overcome. Focus on compliance is really a hard habit to kick, but it is certainly a challenge. And if your strategic vision is limited to compliance, and I use this, you're not trying to be over insulting, but if your strategic vision is compliance, you may need better glasses. Next one is a technologist, and you find a significant number of CISOs who were born and bred in technology, and they are very good at it, although skills decay over time. But they tend to emphasize and rely on the technical expertise and the technical knowledge, and all too often, the answer is, well, gosh, there's a new tool that came in. And I stop to think for a second. If you think about brakes on a car, the reactor says, "Oh my God, I don't have brakes," and tries to steer into into the curb so the car will stop. The monitor says, "God, we better get brakes because otherwise we're going to go through stop signs and get tickets." The technologist says, "My God, there are a whole lot of new brakes coming out there. Maybe we better get some new brakes." But we get to the enabler, and we'll go to that in a second. The enabler says, "I put brakes on a car so the car can go faster. I enable the business." The role of technologist says, yeah, he understands that there are a lot of technological issues, and in many cases they want to start to develop the soft skills so that he can move more to the enabler area. And the enabler is, I see it more as, here's the person who sees himself or herself as a security executive. They see that they have to develop relationships with the board. They understand that the board is going to be concerned about risk. They understand that the board is going to be concerned about what risk will impact the company that they're in. The enabler will be building relationships with the business executives and moving from business executive to business executive. During my first year at Citi, I probably put on 200,000 miles just going around and meeting with leading business executives and leading executives in each geographic region, so that when something came out, they would at least understand that I didn't have two heads, that I wasn't crazy, and I also said, look, here's my home number at that time, here's my pager number, here's a cell phone number that didn't work particularly well, but if something comes up and it sounds totally crazy and you're told that Katz said, you got to go do this, do me a favor, call me up. The other thing that came out of this is it's recognizing that we are, as the enabler, is an advisor on risk. The advisor is not making risk decisions. The advisor is one that says, look, I've looked at the situation. Here's what I think you should do. Here's what I think you shouldn't do. One of the first things I did when I came in as the head of security at Citi is during the first week, my admin walked in with a stack of paper that was about a foot high that said, these are variances to security policy. They need your approval. And because they came in at 2 down from the CEO, I said, unless someone tells me differently, I'm putting in I'm making a policy decision. And it was a key one. It was an important one. I said, we're not going to do security variances. We're doing a security risk exception that had to be signed by a senior business leader. And it was very simple. Here's a policy or standard that we're not going to comply with. Here's why we're not going to comply with it. Here is the risk as I, the business leader, understand it. And there was a place on the bottom that says moving forward with this is against the recommendation of the CISO. I didn't have veto authority. It was just against my recommendation. And 2 of the metrics I reported to the board, or the risk committee of the board, were number of risk acceptances by line of business. So each of the business heads were being compared with their peers, and number of risk acceptances that were against my recommendation. In the 10 years, not one went through. Not one was, not one business leader decided to override my recommendation. But it was strictly and completely a business recommendation. It was not a thou shalt. It was not a thou must. It was, here is what I see as an area of concern. Here is what I think you should do about it. And if you really want to go against a recommendation, it's going to the board. And as long as you can justify it, God bless you, go ahead. But it came back to I was the advisor, not the decision maker. Security doesn't have risk. By and large, technology doesn't have risk. Businesses have risk, and it's operating from that perspective, and it's something that you have to be comfortable enough doing. One of the key things about a CISO, if you're going to be really one of the enablers and one of the top ones out there, you have to be willing to say, this is important enough to the organization I'm part of. It's important enough of an issue for me to raise it as high as I can in the corporation, and I'm willing to be fired for trying to do what I believe is correct. And if you are that good and that confident, and you get fired for it, you'll have a job the next day. The challenge any CISO, new CISO or CISO wannabe has to deal with is, Am I confident enough to bet my job on the decision I'm making? And the really good ones say, absolutely, that is a position I'm willing to take. That is a decision I'm willing to push to the board if I have to. That is a decision that says, I see myself as a leader in this company. I'm here to enable businesses to move forward, and I'm willing to stand my ground. Just one tale out of school, when I was at Citi, we were moving from a proprietary online banking product to a internet-based banking product. And the decision was, and I looked at it, and a lot of money's been spent. I didn't get brought into it till near the end, and I took a look and said, you're not building in a level of encryption that's required. And I said, so my boss, who was actually responsible, I said, you got to stop it. And after some arm wrestling, it was decided that, yep, we held it. But it would have been my job, it would have been my bonus. But it was the right thing to do when, in this case, went okay. What I want to do before we run out of time, if we just go to the next slide, and I'd like to sort of start a religious war. And this is, where should the CISO report? Historically, we have been reporting to the CIO or the CTO. And to the extent you are dealing with an enlightened, business-focused CIO or CTO, it is an acceptable place to be reporting. But by and large, all too often, there's a conflict in objectives between the CISO and the CIO or CTO. The CIO primarily is there to deliver product on time, effectively, with minimum downtime, and he or she has a service level agreement that they have to live up to. The CISO says, wait a minute, we need to make sure certain other things are in place. And if the CIO is the person who controls your compensation, your career, your promotability, and your bonuses, do you really want to go and have an arm wrestle with them? And it is a tough decision. And more you're seeing examiners, auditors saying, gee, having security report to the CIO is not the right place. Next level is the Chief Risk Officer. And in that, I'm sort of goes on a slight tangent. While I was fortunate enough to have the title of the first CISO, it's a title that I think may have to be moved to the background and come up with something which I'm calling the Chief Information Risk Officer, as opposed to the Chief Information Security Officer. Businesses and business leaders understand, deal with, and accept risk. They aren't too crazy about security, but they do understand risk. So I think if we can project, take our title and take our position and say, this is a risk-based decision, a risk-based issue, and we're dealing with risk to information, then maybe the best place for us to report is to the Chief Risk Officer of the organization. And I think one can make a very solid argument as to why it should be there. I have seen CISOs report to the General Counsel. That's been effective, but you wind up getting more push being compliance-driven more than risk-driven. Same situation with the General Auditor. There are some situations where I've seen the CISO report to a CEO or Chief Operating Officer, less frequently, but it has been done. And last, which is not on here, reporting into the Audit and Risk Committee of the board. But I think the religious war is, how do we take it away from the CIO when you hear, well, if you're not part of the technology organization, you can't make security happen. And I'm saying maybe we really need two particular types of security executives, the Chief Information Risk Officer and the Chief Information Security Technology Officer. And with that, I am open to questions.
Steve, thanks. That was great. Hopefully everyone out in the audience there got some great information from Steve as he shared some of his insights. from the years spent as a CISO out there. Hi, I'm Bill Bradley with Digital Guardian, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes to talk to you a little bit about who we are. During that time, I want to remind you all that the chat window on your screen is a place to put any questions you have for Steve. He will be sticking around after my portion here to answer your live questions. So go right ahead, enter them in there, and we will handle as many of those questions as we can. So welcome to the first of our the series of 3 Digital Guardian CISO mentoring webinar series. Today with Steve talking about Digital Guardian to up your game. These are the sessions we're having upcoming. Next session with Ed Amoroso talking about Digital Guardian and strategic data protection. And then session 3 with Larry Brock, Digital Guardian and documented improvement. So with that, I'll kick into my portion here about Digital Guardian to up your game for both insider and outsider risk views. So the first question I'll ask you is, where is your focus as an information security professional? Regardless of where it is, you have a collection of data within your organization, whether that's regulated, such as financial information, healthcare information, or other personally identifiable information, or is it intellectual property, like CAD files in the manufacturing world, maybe drug pipeline if you're in the pharmaceutical world, or even merger and acquisition plans if you're in a large high-growth industry. All of this information is what drives your enterprise value. The issue is the value of this information is not only to you and your organization, but also to those outside of the organization. And regardless of how it gets out, whether through intentional or unintentional means, it's out there. To address it, typically people focus 2 areas, either internally with data loss prevention or DLP. This is where Digital Guardian has our roots, or externally with EDR or endpoint detection and response solutions. And this is an area that Digital Guardian has recently jumped into. The challenge is risks to your data come from anywhere. They don't just come from the inside or the outside. They don't follow a neat pattern. They are a constant risk to your organization. As a result, many organizations will deploy multiple tools to address this, a separate DLP and EDR. Challenge there is you often have gaps as the two don't necessarily align well or really meet together, so you really miss things. Or the alternate is there's too much overlap and you have multiple alerts for the same incidents, causing confusion and really reducing your overall efficiency as an information security team. So has Digital Guardian solved this? Well, we're the first and only person to deliver a unified internal and external risk visibility via a single console and a single agent. We have consolidated endpoint detection and response, data loss prevention, as well as user and entity behavior analytics. Again, all from a single console and all from a single agent. How do we do this? Well, first, Digital Guardian focuses on the data. This is what's important to you, and this is where we look. We deliver immediate visibility into system, user, and data events from the moment we're installed. When we talk about system events, we mean process executions and DLLs. On the user event, it is an application launch or something along that lines. And data events, it's file copies, file pastes, things along that lines. All of these are the events that are going on within your network every minute of every day, and this is the trail of all the sensitive data that goes around your business. With Digital Guardian, the moment you install us, the moment you turn us on, we have that full visibility. No policy, no problem with Digital Guardian. We immediately see all that information as soon as we're turned on. Whether it's on the endpoint, the network, the cloud, we see it moving around your organization. It is that focus on the data that helps deliver this broad enterprise data protection. So we talk about data loss prevention and visibility, which is key to being able to keep data where it is. What are the things that we can deliver? Well, if you're looking at enterprise visibility, we can show you a handful of things. Here's some examples. First of all, we have NTU, or network transfer uploads. We have all egress activity, meaning everything that's going out of the business. We can then focus in on maybe cloud egress activity, print egress activity. And I know some may be thinking that print is an unusual way for data theft to happen or data loss to happen, but oftentimes people realize that the electronics are being watched and they feel sometimes a printer is an easy way to get information out of the business. Digital Guardian can see all that print activity. And finally, removable drives. Whether it's a USB, a flash drive, or anything like that, we have the ability to see what's going on to those and understand the risk in terms of the volume of data that's going out the door via Google Drives. If you're an endpoint detection and response portion of the solution here, whether you're a threat hunter or maybe an incident responder, the visibility you need differs. Here's a couple examples of things that we can show to the threat hunters and the incident responders. First of all, we're running processes. Your organization may see thousands of Outlook launches, Excel launches, PowerPoint launches every day. Those aren't the ones necessarily to worry about. What you're worrying about are the 2, 3, 4, those rare processes, things that only happen a couple times during each one of the days. Those are the ones that are unusual. Those are the ones you need to be concerned about. Next, you have things like suspicious network activity. Is there an unusual IP address that a specific machine is beaconing out to every single day at the same time? Is this expected behavior in your organization, or is this something that as an incident responder or a threat hunter you should be concerned with? So being able to see things is one thing. What's more important is what do you do about it? And this is where Digital Guardian delivers the DLP and EDR real-time responses. So on the screen here, I can show one of our DLP alerts. In this example here is a Mac machine sending email to a personal webmail address. And this can raise some red flags to your organization, understanding what is that file, where is it going, why is it going out. With Digital Guardian, you can simply right-click on that event, go into forensics, and we can understand what exactly that file is. Is it classified? Who else in the organization may have used it? Where did it come from? What type of application was it created in? All these things that a DLP analyst may need to help make a better decision as far as is this acceptable behavior, is this risky behavior, or is this something that we need to block immediately? On the EDR side, same thing. I have an alert here. In this case, it is a covert launch of a file transfer tool. If you're an incident responder or a threat hunter, seeing covert launch of anything such as a file transfer tool would generally raise a red flag to you. Here again, we right-click from that same view as the DLP alert. We can go into the forensic details. We can get a better view for what exactly that covert file launch is. We can see the process tree. We can also understand similarly to the DLP. What exactly is that file? Is it classified? Again, giving that full detailed view that a threat hunter or an incident responder would need to help them make a better decision as far as the risk level of this individual incident. So what does this mean to you? It means Digital Guardian sees all the risks to your data. And we say all your data, whether it is regulated data or intellectual property, whether it's internal threats or external threats. This is the enterprise-wide visibility that Digital Guardian delivers. And how do we do that? Well, we purpose-built a cloud infrastructure to be our security platform. We understand that many organizations are taxed for resources, and to build up their entire infrastructure can be overwhelming. In some cases, they just choose to not do it from a strategic decision. We, as security experts, built that platform for you. We have 2 sensors out there, or 2 core sensors out there, whether they're the Digital Guardian agent or the Digital Guardian appliance. These are what feed back into that big data cloud delivered security platform, so you can deliver that data loss prevention and endpoint detection response out to our enterprise customers without them having to build this infrastructure. So what does this mean? Digital Guardian expands your perspective as an information security practitioner out there. If you're an analyst, you can now see the external risks. It's not just where data is going out, who's moving data out. It's who's trying to come into your organization, who may be targeting sensitive data within the organization. It adds additional level of knowledge to your instance to make a better informed decision about what level of risk is within the business. Next, threat hunters and incident responders. They can see what data is targeted, and this is something that only Digital Guardian can deliver. When you're looking at an endpoint detection response solution, seeing those alerts is critical, but knowing how to prioritize them is what makes the difference. If you have 10 different alerts and all of them look the same, where do you prioritize? With Digital Guardian, I can look at those alerts and I can see these 2 are targeting restricted or otherwise classified data. I know these are where I need to focus my efforts on. As a result, each one of these roles can do their job better. The InfoSec analyst has both internal and external view. Threat hunters and incident responders can both see what the level risks are in terms of the threats, but they can also see what data is being targeted and make better informed decisions. Those are my statements about it, but who else says that? Well, Gartner and Forrester are a couple of the industry analysts out there. And Digital Guardian is the only leader in both enterprise data loss prevention and endpoint detection and response. Our single agent and single console delivers both data loss prevention and endpoint detection and response without the complexity of multiple solutions. With that, I'm going to pass it back over for questions. Again, please put your questions in the chat box, and Steve's here to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. All right, so our winner for our one-on-one executive coaching session with Steve Katz is Andrew J. We will reach out to you via email and get that scheduled. All right, on to the Q&A session. So these are for Steve. How do you position the need for a CISO role in a company without one?
That is probably a really, really tough question. And the answer is, what does a company potentially have that could be a potential risk to that company in terms of financial risk, reputational risk, geographic risk, customer risk? And it is something that has to be really figured out at the board level. And I think if most companies today have one or more of the board members as part of the National Association of Corporate Directors, and if they've attended any of the meetings over the past 2 years, they'll begin to recognize that there's a corporate responsibility to have the board understand information security, and there's a corporate risk and liability risk to each of the members of the board if they don't have either proactive or semi-proactive response to an information security program. But the responsibility does rest with the board, and they are, as much as they are chartered with looking at financial risk, they are also chartered and held responsible and accountable for information security risk and technology risk.
Thanks, Steve. Next question. From your experience, would new CISOs mostly get hired into a new organization or promoted within the same organization?
It comes down to, it depends. If there is somebody within the organization who has the background and the reputation and the confidence of senior management to do the job, great way to go. But it also says they are familiar with the organization, they're familiar with the culture, and they've developed a level of credibility. It does put them at, depending on where they are in the organization, a distinct risk of not being able to bring in the outside security assessment team to be as thorough as they can be, because were part of the program that existed before. The advantage of the external hire, and it's a mixed blessing, is he or she can come in with a clean slate and really get a very honest assessment of exactly where things are. The problem I have is that many organizations require a cultural fit. And while you may be extraordinarily adept at solving technical problems and security problems, if you're not a cultural fit, you wind up dealing with, hate to use a medical term, but almost organ rejection. So the hardest part of the external hire is to develop a level of credibility and respect, and to find a way to make sure they fit into the corporate culture itself.
Great. Next question. Any recommendations from your experience for our CISO conferences or groups to be a part of?
The information security and analysis centers, and you have them in all of the major business sectors, bring in senior security officers, CISOs, sub-CISOs, for annual or semi-annual summits. It's a great networking opportunity. It is not as anywhere nearly as crowded or as overrun as an RSA, and you get industry-focused responses on information security as it applies to what you're doing. So I'm a firm believer of the ISACs. Financial services is now global. Health sector has a growing growing ISAC, about 600 members at this point. Retail sector has that. Certainly, aviation has it. So the first place I would go would be to the ISACs. After that, there's certainly Gartner and certainly Forrester and certainly SANS. But first place I would go would be the ISACs.
Thanks, Steve. Next question. How do you recommend improvement of soft skills? What has worked for you?
An innate curiosity. You do get some really good, updated information at the conferences. You really have to get out there and find just a number of on-site mailing lists that you want to be part of. Certainly, Krebs on security. But there are probably half a dozen really good security sites that you can plug into almost on a daily basis. Brennan Thomas has one coming out of England. You read the headline. If it makes sense, you go deeper. If it doesn't make sense, you just pass and go to the next one. But their internet is great, and most of the technical magazines are online anyway. They're easy to skim. And I would, turning back to the ISACs, generally you find 2 events a year, and the amount of information that's shared is just incredible.
All right, Steve, one last question. What are some of the best lessons that you've learned as a CISO?
First one is very early in my career. They got 2 of them from the same person. There are times you get paid to make a recommendation, and there are times you get paid to make a decision. Make sure you know the difference. And the second one from him was, don't try to be a politician, learn to be a diplomat. And both of those have served me well. And the other is, and I think it was attributed to Steve Jobs, maybe not, doesn't sound like him, but it's one I've tried to, live with as well. If you think you are the smartest person in the room, go to a different room. You need to have people who are smarter than you are, more knowledgeable than you are, to bring information to you so you can sift through it and make a decision. But you want to make sure that if you know more than they do, or smarter than they are, maybe you need a different team of people or a different room.
All right, so that's all the time we have for Q&A today. Just before everyone jumps off, a reminder that next week, same time, same place, we're doing part 2 of our CISO Mentoring webinar series with Ed Amoroso. So join us then. Thank you and have a great day.